Hot for Howard. Everyone wants to see Jeff Bezos' dick now, but I want to see Howard Schultz's dick.
It's a real complexifier.
I think we all knew we were always going to see it. We just didn't know Bezos' dick, but I think it's a much bigger question with Howard Schultz.
Right. Howard, let's see your Schultz.
Like, does he fuck? Question mark.
No.
From the ground up.
Oh.
Hell yeah.
Man.
Hell yes.
Oh, God.
Look at that. I don't even know what that kind of collar is called, but it is not
Awful?
not the regular kind. It's the kind that...
No, it's meant to be worn with a jacket and a tie, though, so he does look like an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, he looks like a Seattleite.
Yeah. He has neck fins.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You know.
That's an adaptation billionaires get.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to swim in gold. That's what you don't realize.
I think the big mistake I'm realizing is that he doesn't have his sleeves rolled up.
Oh, that...
Well, if you're going to get things done,
Yeah.
that's the first step.
Yeah.
The international symbol of getting things done is having your sleeves roll up. And he's not. He's clearly not.
He kind of, at an angle, looks like... It looked like Mike Pence, and then even for a second, I saw some George W. Bush there. Like,
he's like Dino Rossi.
Yeah.
Also.
You see what you want to see.
It's a
Rorschach candidate.
He's a cipher for centrism.
Yeah.
Well, he really is. No, I mean, that's really...
That's too perfect.
Well, it's if someone with just not a thought in their head, just read like shit like Jonathan Chait all day, to understand the world, and that's it, you know? This is what you would come out with. Like, he's a perfect creation of the myth of the center.
Yeah.
Like, he is the manifestation of the great dream of, like, the elite coastal media class.
Absolutely. Mr. Schultz? Made my billion selling bean juice. But really, he wasn't selling bean juice. He was selling the Italian cafe dream. You know?
Yeah.
He, like every other huckster, was selling an idea. Don't tax my fraps.
Your tattoos are so deep, and they really make me think.
Welcome to the show. It's Seattle Sucks again. This is Colin. I'm joined with Greg.
Hey, it's Greg. We're on the podcast about hating the city we love.
Oh yeah, that's who we are. We're on the boat again. Back on the boat, and we have another guest. We're joined with Rich Smith, staff writer at The Stranger, covering politics, theater, and I'm missing one.
Books.
Literature, yeah.
Yeah.
The arts.
Yeah.
Because you're a poet, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I haven't been outed this early in a conversation before, but no, it is in my in the bio. Yeah, I've got a book of poems out called All Talk. That may still be in print. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
I think there was like 500 of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we get really deep into this, can I top you up on your hillbilly corn liquor?
Oh, no, I've got plenty of mellow corn.
So synchronize your episodes now. Pour yourself, I don't know, how many fingers is that? 2 fingers?
Two and a half fingers.
2.5 fingers of
I drank
mellow
a
corn.
finger,
And by the end of the show, you should be finished with your glass.
So, we brought you on, Rich, because like there's this worm growing, like wrapping itself around my brainstem.
Yeah.
It's been like growing and swelling for some time, and it is fed by this weird growing divide in our politics, and how this new divide manifests in like our daily lives and relationships. The contradictions of our whole political system were highlighted in 2016.
Right, Republicans came out as revanchist racists and proud of it, and then Democrats came out as spineless people with zero power, just clinging for some kind of, relevance.
Yeah, exactly. And in the run-up to that, like, another thing that happened is a left emerged for the first time in a while. I certainly find myself on the left side of this divide. That's a place where I've been ideologically for a very long time, but the center liberals, the Democrats, are happy to get to hand-wring about like growing polarization, but that implies, I think, like two poles, and they kind of want to deny that there's more to it than that. And
how can you bridge the divide when it's just there's the divide?
Yeah,
there's no bridging. It's like it's got increasingly polarized. That doesn't mean a bunch of people have rushed to the center.
Yeah, exactly.
And are looking for a place to be, and looking for a uniting figure to unite their centrist ideas. Like, instead of like a bunch of, like, President Trump got elected, and then suddenly everyone was like, hey, what about social liberalism and fiscal responsibility? Right?
Yeah.
That wasn't the response. It was, fuck, tyrant, we need, and also everything is bad. Income inequality is huge and destroying us. And also racism persists and is grown and is public and now has a seat in the White House. And now, that was the response. And I don't think it was a bad one.
No, I think two things happened. It's this very natural reaction and this correct reaction to, like you were saying, the Republicans becoming this, outing themselves as revanchist fascists, basically. And I think the, opposition to that is something I can totally get behind. But there's this weird, simultaneous, denial by centrists that they have to be centrist because there's now a left emergent. And they simultaneously want to say, well, no, we're on the same side, we believe the same things, and can't be made to see the contradictions there or the differences. Or if you can make them see that, their reaction is that it's sort of is on a process level, that it's too radical, too fast, too polarizing. They're unable to confront it on an ideological level. So Colin and I have talked for just so long, beating our heads against. So for me, for example, because, like I said, I was sort of involved in Democratic politics way back in college. I have all these friends and other colleagues I know who are, deep in that shit. Who are, I was a young Democrat at the UW. Okay? And I know a lot of these people still, and a lot of them are lanyards, either here or Olympia or DC. And it's just so weird interacting with them and trying to navigate this thing that we're trying to navigate as a culture, which is these divides and what do they mean and how do you convince someone. And I have these memories of, for some reason when I was a teenager, I used to try and convince my right-wing evangelical mother of things. And take a very facts and logic approach and try to drop all this knowledge to convince her that the Bush administration was so evil because they were torturing, and try to appeal to her facts that maybe would sway her about torture is bad, stuff like this. And it's in the age of Trump, I was not interested in that for a long time, but in the age of Trump it's not even interested in having that's it's long gone, right? But this new this new worm emerged in my brain, which was I have all these friends that I thought were on the same page with me for a lot of years, and we could identify all these things, we were all liberals, And even though I thought of myself in different contexts in different ways as a leftist and a socialist, that all felt like the practical application of that was the same thing, right? And then seeing this big split, I feel like my teenage self again, arguing with my mother when I talk to my friends from college.
I think Hamilton Nolan wrote a post about this in Splinter a while back that made sense to me, which is I think part of a reason for it. If there doesn't seem to be, if it's just kind of the these conversations are happening at the bar with someone who was seriously voting for Hillary Clinton. I could not imagine why you would think anything differently. It's kind of that I think that those kinds of conversations and frustrations emerged because the right stopped making interesting arguments. I mean, during the Bush years, there was at least some argument you had to have about patriotism and whether or not that was useful. Some argument about whether or not torturing people was a useful a thing to do for military to do. And that's when it started to split, and they started getting even more unhinged, and conversation started to be a less interesting mode of dealing with those people than just what we have to do now, which is pure power grabs. But before, you could have like reasonable conversations about like, whether or not government spending was too high, whether or not it made sense to consider the deficit and the debt whenever you're thinking about passing government programs. You could have conversations with, I guess Bush 1 kinds of Republicans about immigration or whatever that could operate on in the world of ideas, and you could convince them maybe of doing it. But then that just stopped happening with the right after Bush, and then liberals who are college educated and like to drink and talk a lot started fighting with themselves, because then some differences emerged between socialists as they got more powerful and people who have money.
Exactly.
And respect and think that the establishment politics should be upheld and necessary for to carry out policy changes. The same people who are coming out against, for instance, the Green New Deal, today as being like, I asked hold on, how many do we have? I asked the entire Democrat congressional delegation of Washington how they felt about the Green New Deal rollout, and every single one of them was like, except for Pramila Jayapal, who was a co-sponsor, was like, I'm so glad that we're doing something to address climate change, but I just don't know about any of it yet. I haven't really. They're completely afraid. It is a resolution. It is a messaging bill. They're completely afraid to say, you know what? Yes, we are having a climate catastrophe faces us in a matter of 1 or 2 decades.
Right, and the message is about scale.
Yes.
Right, it's about scale and that it's the government's burden to intervene.
Yeah,
and those are two pretty simple concepts.
Yeah,
but that's our divide now, and that's our politics. Is like that's the difference right there between the left and a center.
But the Republicans are saying, well, climate change isn't real, so
right.
so it's not fun to have that argument.
No, right? That's like, but they're just that's totally unhinged and boring, and ultimately like they're only like that's like a quarter of the country maybe. Mm-hmm. That's who they can get out to the polls is a quarter of the country, but they should be totally irrelevant. But nobody votes in this country. So
people vote, they just don't vote where it matters.
Yeah.
And part of that could be because we repealed the Voting Rights Act.
Just
part of the conversation about 2016 and any ongoing elections.
It's only getting worse, but already like only 50% of the country was really voting. 60% for Obama, came out in those elections.
Mitch McConnell called establishing a election day holiday a power grab by the Democrats.
Well, that's
but see,
which is to say that voting, it's acknowledging that their entire, the shadow platform is just suppress the vote, suppress
democracy. Well, you can almost admire them for that.
Yeah.
They stick to their plans, which is stay in power, pass tax cuts, and that's it. And they'll say it, and they're not afraid of. They're not obsessed with the decorum of it, and they realize that it doesn't matter, which is another actual divide with the center and the left. Is like, there's a center that is obsessed with this kind of decorum and wrings its hands about process and polarization, and a left that says this shit's serious, let's just do something,
Yeah. Well, the centrist says like, well, don't say what you actually believe. That's not going to get bipartisan support, and then like camera pans to the Republicans, and it's just a bunch of goblins eating each other. Like, we have to try to convince these people to pass a Green New Deal, and then we've got to work with them and reach across the aisle and like go out to where they live and convince them that they should vote in their interests for once in their life or whatever.
Well, you bring up that's a really interesting question right there. This idea: are the Democrats, do they agree with a left on a lot of things, but it's about strategy, or is it actually something else? And I think the point really is what we're talking about here. We live in this city that's super liberal and has all these ideas of itself. It's what we talk about all the time, but its politics are actually, what in this conversation we'd be calling centrist. I mean, it's really conservative, and in a wide range of ways. And but that blob is what you're facing is talking to those people, these Seattleites, these people who think of themselves as liberal, and the question is, are you actually in favor of making the world a better place for people, and do you actually have left or liberal views of the world? And it's about strategy. It's about we can't do things too fast. We have to be incremental. We have to be careful. It's an electoral strategy. We can't seem too left. We'll scare off these conservative voters. I think that's a bad strategy and a misunderstanding. But I think in a lot of cases, and certainly at the establishment level, the actual Democratic Party and the Democratic delegation, and their views are actually very conservative. They're opposed to a Green New Deal. Why be resistant to a Green New Deal, right? Something that's a very popular idea. Why? The bigger, more obvious question is Medicare for all, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hugely popular.
Yeah.
And we've been hearing from, this was the story of the Obama administration. Just this, we'd like to do all these great things, including shit we campaigned on, like closing Guantanamo and healthcare for everybody, and the list goes on. But there's these political forces that are constraining us. When I think we have to step back and go, actually, it's because you don't believe the same things that I do. You believe in this managerial, professional liberalism that that does believe Wall Street knows what they're doing, and does believe in enterprise and corporations, and does believe in American imperialism. And that's the thing, getting my friends who I'm no, you think things like I do, having these conversations and trying to get them to see my perspective has been like talking to Fox News grandpas. It's the same thing. That's what I'm talking about. These Seattle liberals that you talk to and you go you try to have these conversations I used to try to have with my mother, and it's the same thing. And it says to me that there is a difference in ideology, because I think one thing that center liberal America is really obsessed with, and this is something I'd like to hear from you on, is the mind of the Trump voter, truth, facts, journalism, epistemology, that the 2016 was thrown by Twitter memes from Russia, and or just ignorance, and you say, people voting against their own interest, and because you couldn't get the facts out. And something I hear both in the media, but literally from exactly my friend at a bar the other night, is if we could just get the facts in front of people. Why does anyone think that is a strategy? Rich Smith, we go to you.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I thought you were teeing up for another question about objectivity in journalism, which I'm happy to talk about. But what we live, because of, I feel like I'm about to have a kind of a boring answer, but we live in two completely separate. What Trump was very good at doing was creating an entirely separate universe of people who believe information from this source, and he constantly continues to deride as fake information from all other sources not approved by him and his followers. And so even if you do give them a fact, let's say, from a newspaper, they're going to say, well, that's from the liberal biased media. You can't convince me. My preacher has to say it, or Donald Trump has to say it, and it's not the truth. The postmodernist world, Republicans figured out how to corrupt postmodernism and enact it in a gross way, and that's what I think we're seeing. If truth is relative, that means that that truth doesn't exist. So truth is whatever I say it is, and so I can construct it. That's a misreading, of course, of most general ideas of postmodernism. But that's they were like, oh, we can fucking politicize that, and they did, and so it's you can't. I don't think you can, with a series of facts or reasonable arguments, convince somebody at this point, who's like gonna vote for Trump that.
No, you can't, because if you could say, Elliot Abrams, don't you, like, you could just start listing facts, right? You'd be like, no, do you understand? This guy, Trump just appointed, like, this horrible man to like, be the point man on Venezuela. And you could say...
The Contra guy.
Yeah, exactly. You could say, like, but, he's responsible for all these crimes, but you'd have to... Then the next question is, well, what crimes? Oh, well, he's a genocidaire for American imperialism in Central America and in the Dirty Wars. And, like... But then the question is, what dirty war are you talking about? Oh, well, you see, Reagan was actually a bad guy. Well, actually, he was kind of dumb and senile and an asshole. Uh-huh. And, well, then you're done there already. But then if you somehow were trying to explain that, okay, you're saying, well, don't you remember Iran-Contra? It's like, well, yeah, weren't we on the right side of the Cold War? Which is like what Elliot Abrams has said when questioned about this stuff in the media over the last, decades. Uh-huh. And you go, oh, well, no, see, actually the Cold War was horseshit. It was a bunch of lies. It was a giant waste of time and money, and killed millions of people fruitlessly. Also, the Soviets always were just scared shitless of us and wanted peace the whole time. Oh, also, communism's really cool. It's like, you just have to, you keep going down. That's why the facts, you can't. You should be able to say you just point at Elliot Abrams and go, holy shit, this guy is one of the worst people on earth. Yeah,
that's why there's no bridging the divide with those kinds of people, but through reasoned arguments,
facts
or
and logic,
through the normal channels. But you can, so you have to go you have to move to the different point of the rhetorical triangle, and go to pathos and recognize that they are suffering. Like, one thing they can't lie about the fact that they are paying out of their ass for deductibles, and they can't find houses, and they're losing money. Well, some of them, the middle class people who support Trump, and
which is a lot. I think
which is
the quintessential Trump voter is like a white suburban small business shithead.
Yes, has a landscaping business outside of Belton, Missouri, and it's got a dually in the driveway,
with a jet ski on a trailer behind it.
Absolutely, brother, you bet. And he's also down at Party Cove next weekend because he loves this country and because Trump is the fucking president. And was he down at Party Cove when Obama was the president? Yes, he was. But you know what? Fucking, he was losing money on that.
Yeah. Well, I think the fascinating part here,
when you were talking about people, you earlier we were having a conversation about growing up and talking to other teens about Bush and the war and stuff, and it just took me back all the way to my roots in Missouri and having these kinds of conversations with people. But yes, and I covered a lot of Trump rallies, and a lot of people at Trump rallies weren't the subaltern looking around for guidance from a businessman. It was a lot of people like the person you're describing. A lot of people in expensive trucks who had a house were fine, who just not racist.
Right.
You can be like, we're going to give you free health care. And they're like, all right, keep talking. You can at least get them to that. You can at least get them to keep talking.
That goes to something important, because I think the Medicare for All thing works as a message because it gets to something much deeper than a lot of policy bullshit usually does. Mm-hmm. And that matters because, again, I keep hearing it's about all the problem is all the fake news and the memes and the information wars, you know, and like as we've just discussed, that's bullshit, and it's not going to work. And that's because, like you were saying, those people don't trust you as a source, you know? And what I want to get down to is the reason for that. And I want to say, I believe that it's basically worldview and ideology, and not so much the effects those specifically have on the interpretation of facts, but an identification with figures and sources, Fox News and Trump, with a worldview. Those Fox News has been able to say to a swath of America, we have the same worldview.
Yeah.
Either by meeting them where they were at, like with racist dog whistles, and like convincing them that they really were a racist shithead like they were, or by slowly appealing over years on a lot of other moral and ideological stances that convince them that these people are with me on worldview, on ideology, how I look at the world, what's important. That's where that's trust. That sort of camaraderie of ideology is where trust comes from. Because there's no other way, and that I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's no other way to. The world is full of information. There's never going to be an objective way to filter that.
Yeah.
And so it's about people you trust, and the reason you trust them is ideology. And so that's why you can't get through to these people, because you fundamentally disagree on a lot of things. I'm not going to meet like the Klan where they're at and then try and get them, like, lay down some facts for them.
Do you feel the same way? Are we just talking about campaigning here, or are we talking about the sausage making of the government process? Because some of those people who I'm guessing that you were at the bar with would say, like, yes, I am in favor for Medicare for all. Of course I love Medicare for all, but listen, we get it into Congress. You've got the Congress is made up of these kinds of people. They all have to serve their demographic populations. And let's say somewhere like the central Washington, like, that person isn't going to vote on Medicare for all. That person is going to vote on something like a Medicaid expansion, or even a slight, like, lowering the threshold for Medicaid. So suddenly, it's like, I am with you on the idea, but whenever we get into actually enacting the policy, the idea is clearly, to me, a practical realist, just a starting point for negotiations. Right. And because I know that that's going to get whittled down to something else, I'm not going to sit here and run purity tests on people who are trying, Democrats in these kinds of swing districts who are trying to keep their seats whenever they come out and say, actually, I don't know if I can do Medicare for all. I'm going to do, a slight Medicare expansion, or, something that, or lower the age limits for when you can buy into Medicare or something. Like, that's the kind of response I always get from people, the flacks, basically.
Well, this is where ideology comes in, and in the centrist, even though they will deny this, and I have more to say about that, but, like, I think the basic Democratic establishment is very conservative. They really, to their core, aren't for Medicare for all. They're not for government programs. They are for keeping inflation at zero by not spending money and still being able to not tax. They are essentially conservative. There is a whole lot of other people, including my lanyard friends and lots of other people, just like with on the right, there are people who really, it's like the people who were met where they were at with the racist dog whistle, and the other people who were brought on board with some other stuff and are there. I think the ideology and the trust there is the Democratic Party has signaled to a lot of people, a lot of coastal liberals, a lot of Seattleites, over the years has convinced them we share an ideology. We believe the same thing, whether that's objectively true or not. And so when they hear from that establishment, that sort of liberal media and Democratic Party establishment, that exactly all the stuff you were just saying, because that is readily available in every paper in America, in the Seattle Times, the New York Times, on MSNBC, whatever. they go, well, I trust this establishment because I believe we have the same ideology about things ultimately. I believe that they really think the same things I do. Mm-hmm. So they trust that they're right about that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating thing is I want to convince those people, no, those people don't believe the same things you do.
Yeah.
You know?
It could be, it could be that, because the counter argument to that is always like, well, those politicians are just representing the people who elected them, and the people who elected them aren't far left liberals who want Medicare for all or whatever. And the answer to that, I think, for me is twofold. One is maybe you're just bad at communicating exactly how good these policies are. Or maybe you just don't know how to adequately talk to your constituency,
or you haven't tried,
or your potential constituency, or you haven't tried, and that's it. I can't remember the second thing.
Sorry, I might have derailed you.
No. Well, yeah.
No, I think that's the thing. Is like they haven't tried because ultimately my belief is at the top. Chuck Schumer really doesn't want those things. So no, they're not gonna try.
Yeah.
They're not. They're gonna come up with lots of reasons that make it sound like, well, yeah. I mean, if you get down to it, whatever. But there's all these circumstantial, political reasons why we can't do that to whatever degree. I mean, they're slippery. They're all over the place. But I think
we can't, because if we do it, we're eliminating the insurance industry, the health insurance industry, and we can't do that. God forbid we eliminate the health insurance industry. The beloved American health insurance industry would have to be completely reformed if we enacted this policy.
That well-oiled
But this
machine.
is also what you're getting at. It's like the reason why, let's say, Chuck Schumer isn't going to is because his entire political career is backed by interests, moneyed interests, who would like him, to continue to be a neoliberal. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's an entire planet engaged in privatizing government services. There's a global lobby for this. Like, it's a massive interest, coordinated class of interests desperately working through the IMF, the World Bank, and the U.S. government to privatize everything.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that there are representatives for that point of view in government in this country. Like, it is a major force, and that's why they're against it. I mean, what's interesting there is,
and if they successfully implement a big government program like that and see how popular it is, that really fucks with their money. This is Shama's argument, right? About locally, just thinking about how it's like the corporate-backed Democrats on the Seattle City Council don't want public housing. They don't want massive, they don't want to spend millions and millions of dollars, $500 million or whatever, investing in public housing, because if there's a successful, string of public houses that are built, and if the housing crisis lessens as a result of it, then it risks their electability suddenly, because suddenly the developers don't want to give money to them anymore, etc. So this is a way in which I see what you're saying,
because it's easy to argue it's easy to do to maintain a status quo. That's the basic ballgame.
What makes it so insane-making is that the problems facing us are so huge and systemic and system-breaking that there's no way maintenance of the status quo is going to be able to help fix those problems. Like, for instance, I'm stuck on this new Green Deal thing. I asked Rick Larson for comment, and he was the one who was most not interested in the Green New Deal because he represents Boeing, and he was just like, I don't know if I can back anything that's gonna make it so that people are not gonna want to fly, and because the people I represent make the safest airplanes in the country, etc., etc. It's like, have them make trains. make Boeing do the high speed, like just change what they make. They, it's made of the same materials, essentially. Have the engineers like do a long training session, lose money, but see an opportunity in systematic change rather than seeing it as like this big, it's impossible, it sounds too big or whatever. And these are just scared little people who want to retire.
The people in service of this are scared little people, but they have these arguments ready to deploy that have been crafted for them by an interest that is in maintaining the status quo.
Yeah.
Which, I have all these, historical materialist arguments for why we should fucking change everything in our country and world, right? But, it is kind of all irrelevant in a way because, climate change is just so massive. It's so clear that you are going to have to rewrite all the terms of society and certainly this economy. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that's going to be a major dividing line, hopefully that will be a litmus test, a purity test.
A purity test. It doesn't seem to be for Rick Larson. He's like, what's he going to do? It's like, whenever the water wars start or whatever in 50 years, and it's like Boeing still makes planes. Like, Boeing's going to have to make rugged dune buggies and water barrels, right? It really is going to be a very, shitty place for people our age to grow up in, or at least people, who are under 30. But the boomers...
They don't have a bunker or compound.
And I get where it's coming. I get the boomers can fall back on this kind of, and not to be ageist, but the boomers can fall back on this, memory or, idea where, policy making was just a bunch of people having nice conversations with each other, but those people, of course, were all a bunch of white dudes who were not affected by the policy that they were creating. And now that people have been elected to Congress who are on the left, who are on the far left, who are saying, the comet is coming and we need to do something about the comet, their immediate reaction is like, no, we can just play a nice game of chess and go home at 5:30 or whatever, and they're feeling like they're losing a sense of stability that was there for them, but is not going to be there for all of us soon. And it's the people who have been elected on the progressives who have been elected, who I think speak that truth the strongest, and they don't like it.
No, they really don't.
It's not comfortable. They're worried about disappointing people. They won't get their job. They won't get their retirement. And they won't get to work out in the Capitol gym anymore.
Fuck that, man. That's a joke, because you can have all that shit. But it's, there's going to be a redistribution.
One way or another.
Yeah. Just exactly like that. So you're talking to, electeds, but there's people our age in this city, this very liberal, centrist city, that you can have these conversations that go like, well, yeah, we have to weigh all the options and, we have to just,
bring the stakeholders to the table.
But do you not see that, this Green New Deal idea is very simple, and it is a clear thing. There's nothing to commit to in it really, except that it's big.
Yeah, we have to allocate a greater percentage of our GDP to government spending than we have in 60 years.
Yeah.
we did it in World War II. The difference is that people are super pumped to kill and the bad guy, but they look at climate change and it's too diffuse of a bad guy. They look at rampant income inequality that is hurting them and it's too diffuse of a bad guy. They don't think that the government is very good at killing that bad guy. They think the government is only very good at using guns to kill the Nazis.
Yeah, and that's the centrist ideology. I think another interesting conundrum in there is so we talked about how you can't talk to conservatives with facts and shit. It's just they're on it because they're on a different plane. So bringing that, I've tried to bring that lesson learned from my mother to trying to convince some of my friends, but. I bring that lesson of okay, you can't. It's not just all about the facts. You have to start from a worldview perspective. But the problem is, when you talk to a centrist lib on worldview terms, that actually turns them off faster than anything, because the thing they are more afraid of than anything is ideology. To them, like, that's the boogeyman. It's ideology itself. That's where our extreme politics come from. That's where they don't believe they have an ideology. We've just discussed a lot of, like, the details of their ideology. They don't believe they have that. What they believe they have is smart people and objective facts. Now, you're in the business of objective facts.
Yes.
Rich Smith, so where does that get us?
Yeah, I don't know. It's, it's impossible to escape ideology. The newspapers, papers of record, purport to be outside of ideology or to exist outside of ideology whenever they just report the facts on any story or issue. This goes wrong in two ways, right? It leads to both sidesism as a reflection of so-called objectivity. So as long as you ask a Republican about immigration and a Democrat about immigration,
Or climate change.
Or climate change, right? Yeah, that article is ideologically inert. It is objective because, look, you've got it right there. A Republican holding a snowball in the middle of an article and being like, oh, where's global warming?
Yeah.
And then a Democrat quoting a scientist being like, yeah, we've got 20 years. And then here's my stack of reports, right? And then, so that breeds this kind of, equivalent or equivalency between ideas, which is wrong, false. You are equating two ideas, and one of them is clearly and demonstrably false, and the other one is clearly and demonstrably right. And then, so for the sake of a completely self-imposed definition of objectivity, you are going to present both as fact. That's the gamble that's being taken at the majority of the papers of record in this country. That's one thing. That's like one way in which it plays out. The other way in which it plays out is, you'll claim to be objective, but you're telling a story, and whenever you're telling a story, like whenever you're taking a photo, you are cutting out a certain square of life and choosing what goes in that square. It's the same thing when you're telling an objective newspaper story. So I'm thinking of an article I recently read in a newspaper about, business owners being mad about homeless people sleeping in RVs in Soto or whatever, and this is like presented as like, this is just a fact. Crime is spreading in Soto and business owners are mad at homeless people about it. Is there any it's property crime. Is there any
it's like our two favorite words on this podcast.
And of course, business owners were interviewed. Their views were expressed. Maybe they got one person sleeping in an RV, being like, "No, I'm not breaking anything at the moment," But this was presented as objective fact. Like
objectively reporting on someone's ideological opinion.
Right, and the headline basically made you think that Soto is overrun with homeless people who are gonna break your car if you go in there, And so it's that's not removed from ideology. That is an ideology that is more in support of small business interests, not wanting to have broken windows around their candle factory or whatever the fuck. Right. So those kinds of stories happen all the time. This happens all the time with fucking cops too. A lot of it is just they're just printing cops press releases, and then later on it takes forever to figure out that actually the white cop was racist and then just shot the kid. It takes a very long time to actually get to the objective truth that they're looking at. But so much of it initially is presented as fact divorced from ideology. But it's clearly not.
Because you can't escape ideology. Because clearly, like the idea, and this is pervasive in newspapers, like you say, that whatever comes out of the police department is, facts, just objective facts that should be reported. But that's a highly ideological concept, and that's highlighted by the fact that there's a growing segment of people in this country who really hate cops and think they should all go away.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
So, like, you can see, like, that's not the only opinion to have, you know?
Urbanists scream about this all the time, and I think they're right. You know, when they talk about people getting killed in car wrecks or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're like, you know, an SUV killed a person who was walking across the street. It's like, no, a driver, like a human, a human being killed another human being who was walking across the. So in almost every choice, every wording choice, every linguistic choice that they make, they are picking who has agency and who doesn't have agency, and in that way they are picking sides about power, and in that way they are perpetuating a certain kind of ideology. And anybody who is not sweating every time they write something. Every time they write a newspaper article, about that. Anytime anybody who isn't constantly questioning the language that they're using to describe these kinds of events, any reporter who isn't is doing it wrong. Yeah. And they use this I'm just reporting the facts, or centrist idea as a shield to prevent them from doing the real earnest mental work that they have to do to say, hey, what am I writing here? What am I recording here? And am I picking a side of what I'm doing here? Or whose side am I on? And is it right to be on that side?
Yeah, well, see, now you got to it there. At the end, the last question is, you have to ask, is it right to be on that side? Mm-hmm. There's no escape from ideology, okay? Yeah. You have to pick a side, because there is usually a fucking side, okay? There is right and wrong, and you have to pick that. Which is why, I think, again, to get back to, the idea of trust and facts, why you can't communicate to this large segment of the population, the sort of liberal media establishment is wrapped up in doing what you were just describing, and for that reason, I think there's a way that influences, and I think it's largely pulled to the right because, the both sidesism has weighted toward this weird, myopic, tiny, racist portion of the population. But another thing is, because there's no clear ideology, there's no right or wrong, there's no perspective, essentially, there's no moral perspective. I think that is one reason that a lot of people don't trust that as a source, or don't feel like they can get anything out of it, and have tuned out from mainstream media, from newspapers. Whereas they trust sources that have made them identify with their worldview. Connected, and they've built that trust. So that they can say, I can get my information from this because I know they share my worldview, and what is important to me, they believe the same, and so I can get my information from this source, like Fox News, for example. Right. But the rest of the shit is either they believe it's an opposite ideology, or their local paper is just confusing drivel because it has no perspective that they can trust.
Yeah. Well, I will say I am grateful, or I do like that there are people on the other side who are coming at it with that ideology. People with really conservative bents who will just admit that that's the bent that they're writing with, and then here's the argument from this side, just because it sharpens the arguments that I can make, or that anybody could make. It's useful. It's just the second that we pretend that there's this middle that is the truth, that's when it's just nobody's happy, and an actual conversation is stymied.
I think we need more ideologically positioned media outlets. I mean, those are growing in new media, for sure. We're down to one-paper towns all across America.
Especially right here in Seattle, with The Stranger being the only newspaper.
Seattle's only newspaper, exactly.
Gotta plug it.
Stranger, a paper, the only paper I've read in this town for many years, including when I lived in Los Angeles.
It's a shame what happened to LA Weekly.
Yeah, they're all going away, but you do have to ask the question, why would there be multiple newspapers? Why would it matter? If they're all going to... If the Times and the PI were largely going to have... I mean, that's a long story, whatever, but if they're newspapers that are just trying to print objective, anti-ideological just the facts, ma'am. Shit, like what is the point of multiple? There aren't multiple perspectives.
Right. There's only one thing that's true, and that's the facts.
Right.
So we should just have one city newspaper per city, and they should just employ all the journalists, and all the journalists will be working for the facts.
Or at the very least, there's no reason for there to be more than one. There's no so.
It's as if
I think
the Seattle Times
Yeah.
has an ideological bent, but it shields it.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do, and they present it in this way that is faux objective, and if that's what it's going to be, like, it's no wonder. I think that's contributed to the death of print media, is a lack of, like, if all these outlets are just offering the same thing, and you can get all of them on your computer.
Yeah.
That's one reason that you don't need, if there's multiple perspectives, if there were like a union paper in this town, like everywhere there was, and like a insane billionaire right-wing rag like the Seattle Times, and like, and everything in between, you'd have a reason to seek out that perspective.
Yeah.
And that's a reason.
We're beating up on the Seattle Times, but the reporters do good work. But the editorial board is the thing that I'm thinking of. Though some of the reporters do like purport to be just doing the objective work of reporting, but they aren't actually doing the bidding of an ideology, or ideologically they're being propelled by an ideology, whether or not they admit it or even see it as such. Seems to be suspect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope that was cathartic.
Here.
I mean, we do have you talking about the book at the top. I think we could pick a chapter out of that. Pick it like do they have titles? The chapters.
Yeah, I was just telling Colin. Okay, so like.
And didn't he has other books too,
Oh yeah,
right?
he has two others.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's one about like
they're like
his
author of Charlotte's Web.
Okay. Did we get anywhere in this conversation? Did this end up anywhere, or am I just going to keep pulling my hair out? Have we landed on any?
No, of course you're going to pull your hair out, because this isn't going to stop. But
yeah,
I think it's
honestly
interesting.
It's just a fascinating thing. It's going to be the next year and a half is going to be fucking insane bedlam, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be fun. I love it. Arguing with my lib friends, trying to get them to see a few things my way, maybe. Like, I don't know. It's part of whatever praxis is needed going forward.
Totally.
It's something I haven't. I don't know. I haven't figured out exactly what it is yet, but it's something. You need those people to have class consciousness too.
Yeah.
So, Rich,
can we do a Howard
why are
Schultz?
you carrying around Howard Schultz book?
I have to write a feature for the Stranger newspaper in February. Watch out, Schultz. Hard hitting from your own hometown.
Yeah, from his the only news. He must have it on his desk.
This
when it comes out.
motherfucker, Howard Schultz. I went to his little poetry reading at the Moore last week.
I know. Yeah, you were there, weren't you? I read your coverage of that.
And he was there, and he said he was going to meet with the media, but then he ran away. Everyone was there for 2 hours just so they could ask him one serious question, which my question would have been like, hey, which earned benefit programs are you thinking about cutting in order to balance the budget? Like, would you cut Medicare or, Social Security first? I wanted to ask him, that question. He didn't stick around. He ran out the side door before anybody could ask. Anyway, so I have to write a feature on the enduring reality of Howard Schultz.
That's a good way to put it.
Perpetuated only by his billions and by a former Obama staffer who happens to have some connections among probably a lot of centrist liberals who are in the producing teams of CNN.
Yeah. God.
But he's out there and he's got a message,
He's got a message. I got to give it to him. He is making his message very clear. He's actually saying very concrete shit.
Yes.
Like, we can't Medicare for all. We can't afford it. And it's un-American.
It's un-American.
And he compared it in that first 60 Minutes drop. He compared it to the Wall.
Yeah.
The Wall. Medicare for all, Trump's Wall.
Yeah.
In Howard
Equally bad
Schultz's
things.
centrist mind, they are both radical departures from the American way of life.
Yeah.
Well, from the silent majority, the center.
Yeah. I mean, the Twitter joke is like, well, it isn't American because Europeans have health care for all,
Yeah,
and
exactly,
America has this. You know, but it is American to try to, help as many people as you can, and Medicare for all would do that.
I don't know if that is American.
Okay,
I'm not
right.
prepared
It is.
to...
I was coming out of my mouth and I was like, this is wrong. This is a lie. Why are you saying
No, America is based on exploitation of the worker.
Rugged individuality.
Rugged individualism, indeed.
and
Yeah.
and racism and then
Manifest destiny.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do have
genocide. What else? What other things is America based
Theft.
on? I have a copy
Theft.
of People's History there. If you want to behind you, if you want to thumb through it.
God, that was an education for me. First, and I listened to, definitely didn't know about it until I watched Good Will Hunting. And
Awesome, very cool. Wow.
I'm sorry. And then I was like an undergraduate at the University of Missouri, just trying to leave. That I didn't, I didn't know, anything. And then, I watched Good Will Hunting, and then there's a People's History, and I was like, well, I mean, if Matt Damon's read it, and I opened up, and it was, the first chapter is like, and Columbus sharpened his knives with the bodies of Native Americans.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit. That's horrible. Yeah, so genocide. And sexism.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so read us some chapters names and we'll pick one.
Okay,
just to kick this off. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening for the first time because we have the very handsome Rich Smith here with us, if that's what's brought you, note that if you would like to hear more about our thoughts on Howard Schultz and why we can afford anything because money is just a made-up concept, our last episode covers that in detail. What do you got here?
Yes, I noticed that your last episode covered it in detail, which is why I was a little bit afraid to bring the book. But I thought, you didn't have Howard Schultz's perspective.
Yeah, no. We want to hear it in his own words. We didn't
We
last
want to
time.
be objective.
It's a little bit complicated the way this is laid out, but there's 3 parts. Each part has some chapters. So maybe we could pick a part and then pick a chapter from the part.
Yeah.
So the 3 parts are beginnings, intention and reinvention, and then part 3,
Charter schools. No, that's not it.
Howard Schultz. No, it's bridging divides.
Ooh, hey, that sounds on point.
That's on point. That's what we've been talking about, right?
All right,
Bridging divides.
that's a winner. Ding, ding, ding.
So you got to divide. How do you get a bridge there? That's it. Howard Schultz has a couple chapters dedicated to that very question. One chapter is called Just Discuss. One is called The Third Rail in the Third Place.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We were riffing on that.
If you touch Howard Schultz, if you touch Howard Schultz's third rail in his third place, you get a free coffee.
Well, your third eye opens and you see the third way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Is this where he asks America to be his third?
Rethink the possible.
The polycule.
America, will you be my third? Did he say that?
He should. Yeah, I think that's what he's intimating.
I think that's what. Yeah, right. The third rail in the third place opens up the third eye to reveal the third way. What I'm asking is, can we have a threesome, America?
Yeah.
Where I am your George Washington Godlord, and you all drink my bean juice anyway, and so just let me just cut your earned benefits.
Okay, well, if this is a larger metaphor, not just about banging him and his wife, then what is the other part? It's him.
Starbucks.
Yeah, Starbucks. Yeah.
It's a global phenomenon.
Coffee.
It's there in 77 countries. Howard has built incredible relationships with different countries, and that's what he's going to do when he's the president of the United States of America. Because let me tell you what, there's a silent majority of 40% of Americans who identify as independents are just ripe for someone to come along and say, remember the 90s? Let's go back to
corporate self-congratulation. My God, he sells drinks that are mostly consist of 2 highly addictive substances, caffeine and sugar. He's basically
like the most
he's
addictive.
The sugar daddy.
He's oh my God, he is he's like the tobacco companies basically.
One of these chapters is just called filial piety. There's also
this is hard to choose.
This is also share your blanket, gumption. Gumption.
That's when he watched Forrest Gump.
Sounds incredibly banal.
Welcoming places.
Decided to invest in bubblegum shrimp companies.
Okay.
Accountable.
I am kind of curious what his vision for us.
Oh, a better version of us.
A better version of us.
316.
John.
No way.
I've never thought of the third place just as a physical environment. For me, the third place has always been a feeling, an emotion.
Is this Stephen King now?
An aspiration that all people can come together.
For fast food.
For fast food and for sugar drinks. And be uplifted chemically as a result of a sense of belonging. This is the cornerstone of our business, yes, but belonging is also a basic human right, which should be afforded to all members of society, especially persons of wealth. People means. Because creating a sense of belonging is central to Starbucks' story. The company was compelled to respond to the events in Philadelphia with a serious self-reflection. Jesus! How much? Series of self-reflection and substance. Much more than apologize, we sought to examine bias in our own company and also in the country and explore ways to combat it. The momentous topics were not ones we were equipped to address ourselves because, after all, we're just selling bean juice based on a burn-it-to-the-ground business model.
No, he's selling the idea that because you drink coffee, you're fucking Balzac.
Yeah. For some reason, a ruthless private business model is not the way to solve racism.
No, it clearly is.
Straight. Eric Holder, the 82nd Attorney General of the United States and a member of the board of the NAACP. I just looked that up. Yeah.
He has to... Why does it matter that he's the 82nd anything?
It's just so you know, he's legit.
Okay.
He is comes from a long line of attorneys general. Advised Kevin early on not to rush to respond to public pressure for immediate answers, but to take the time to understand the details of what happened that day and be intentional about our actions going forward.
Nice that he got PR advice from Eric Holder. That's fucking weird.
Yeah, did he get money for that? I wonder if he got invoiced.
No, it's just Eric Holder's voicemail.
Yeah.
No, you know what it is?
Kevin? Kevin was not introduced.
Not in this. We didn't read. You're gonna find out.
You'll know.
Rich. You're gonna find out exactly who Kevin is.
We'll have you back.
I'm guessing that he's gonna be like the
is.
VP of PR.
Yeah.
But what's interesting there? Let's pick this apart because. Yeah. So what he did was, as part of the PR strategy, because what he's running on, I guess, from what we got from these chapters titles, is basically this is all about Starbucks confronting racism, and so what his thesis is, I should be president because I have experience giving the most elaborate and thorough apology tours, which is like the currency of contemporary America. But in this case, okay, what do you do on a classic apology tour? They had this, incident, and they're like, "Who? No, a lawyer. Yeah.
The biggest one.
No. What do? You call the most powerful person you can from the aggrieved group. So they're like, okay, President Obama is not going to take this call. Attorney General Eric Holder is the most powerful black man in America who will take our call and advise us and accept our apology.
Yeah. So we're just going to roll with that and say that we did the right thing by not immediately pulling this horrific...
I thought they kicked somebody out.
what was it, program?
No. It was. He's referring to
When they did
one of the incidents that happened in a Starbucks where like
when they kicked out.
were kicked out, arrested,
my
they
God.
called the cops. You
got
know,
the Menchie's
as people
treatment.
do at fast food joints,
Right,
as
yeah.
fast food suburban fast
In a
food
su-
stuff
yeah, in a
does.
suburb.
Right, if a black person is sitting there,
Yeah.
they're committing a crime and they need to be kicked out. I remember.
Yeah. I mean McDonald's doesn't do that because McDonald's doesn't have like any
Customers?
highfalutin concept of itself. Like, but you know, when it's the third place, these suburban white people like managing this get a little haughty, and again,
Yeah.
they're looking at their customers like they're fucking Balzac and like writing their fucking masterpieces, and so they're like, oh, what's this black person doing here? I'm scared.
Yeah. And then Eric Holder, I love Eric Holder's advice, which is be intentional going forward.
That's very lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like cover your ass, man.
That's like that sounds like his reasoning for
Don't. Yeah. What? The opposite of that is react however you want to.
yeah.
It is the worst advice you could give somebody.
Again, very lawyerly.
that sounds like, you know, that's his justification for not prosecuting Wall Street. You know, like,
Yes.
we saw a problem. We were intentional going forward, and our intention was not to prosecute others.
Do you want to know the last sentence in the book?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a spoiler.
Okay.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States.
Above all, let us choose to believe in each other because now and always we are in this together.
Wow.
Let us choose to believe in each other. Why would we believe in each other? Because we're in this together.
We all got to do our part. Some more than others.
So what I guess what he's saying is from each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs. Thanks everybody. This has been Seattle Sucks. Thanks for listening. Speaking of from each according to their abilities, you can give us money to keep this podcast going at patreon.com/Seattle Sucks.
Shout out to Jason Rigdon,
our newest
friend of the show, and
friend of the show,
most
good friend of the
recent,
show,
yeah.
and most recent patron.
Seattle Sucks evangelist, I think.
Yeah, that is
title.
he. Yeah, no, it's definitely
That
in the
honorific.
hipster tier. He above hipster tier.
We start signing your name that way, Jason. That would rule. Yeah, and thank you, Rich, for being on the show.
Rich Smith. Check his work out in The Stranger, on Slog. He is a regular member of the podcast Blabbermouth, which you can find at thestranger.com also, where he talks to his colleagues about the news of the day.
In a Starbucks, right? The third place.
They all meet in the third place.
Where else would you meet?
Actually, this won't surprise you, but The Stranger is run out of a Starbucks, and it always has been.
We know the code. We know to go to the bathroom.
The bathroom code. Yeah.
We publish it every day.
It has the best acoustics. Thanks, everybody, and good night.